Have you ever been told you didn't belong by someone who didn't know you owned the building? That's exactly what happened at 10:16 a.m. on a humid Thursday morning in Savannah, Georgia. Inside the marble and glass private client lounge of Briar and Thorn Bank, a woman stood motionless in front of a mahogany desk. Black, poised, understated. Her name, Dr. Celeste Monroe. Her crime? Walking into a space designed for the ultra-wealthy, without announcing that she was one of them. "You don't belong in this room, ma'am," said Linda Rayburn, the branch manager, with a smile so sharp it could cut paper. Celeste didn't blink. She wore no designer logos, no flashy diamonds, just tailored slacks, a cream cardigan, and her signature stillness. Her hand rested calmly on a leather folio. Inside it, contracts that controlled more of this bank's future than Linda could imagine. Linda gestured toward the lobby. "We have seating outside for general clients." Celeste glanced around. Two men in blazers looked up. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A soft cough. Then silence. Celeste finally spoke, her voice cool but clear. "I requested access to complete a transfer." Linda tilted her head. "And I requested proof of who you are." Across the lounge, a young teller named Elena paused mid-keystroke, eyes darting to the tension in the air. She knew something wasn't right, but her training told her to stay quiet. Celeste reached for her phone, not to film, not to call a lawyer. She opened an app labeled Blue Leaf Admin, Level 1, then tapped one word: activate. Linda folded her arms. "You think I'm going to be intimidated?" Celeste looked up at her, steady as stone. "I'm not here to intimidate you," she said softly. "I'm here to see who fails the test." And the clock started ticking. Celeste Monroe had been here before. Not in this exact bank, not in this exact chair, but in this exact moment. The moment when people saw her face and decided what she could afford, what she deserved, and who they thought she was. At 29, she'd been denied a business loan for her first clinic. At 32, she was asked to leave a real estate seminar because the front desk mistook her for catering. At 39, a junior banker once asked her how she got that kind of money, as if wealth had to come with whiteness. So today, at 52, dressed in her favorite thrifted cardigan and scuffed heels, Celeste walked into Briar and Thorn not just as a client, but as a quiet reckoning. Linda Rayburn, the manager, still stood stiff across from her, tapping a red acrylic nail on the desk. "I'm going to have to ask you to verify your identity," she repeated. Celeste didn't argue. She simply turned her phone around and showed her screen, an internal portal, not public-facing, stamped with an animated seal. Blue Leaf Compliance Grid. Admin Access, Level 1. Linda frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Celeste didn't answer. Across the room, Elena, the young teller, froze. She'd only seen that interface once during onboarding. It was mentioned briefly in training, as something used by outside partners to audit ethical behavior in high-net-worth institutions. Why would a regular client have access to that? The room grew quiet again. Celeste remained seated, composed, hand folded on her lap. The timer on her phone ticked softly. 02:17. 2:18? Elena stepped out from behind the counter and walked slowly toward the lounge. Linda's eyes narrowed. "Where do you think you're going?" Elena didn't answer. She looked at Celeste, then at the screen again, and in that moment, she understood. This woman wasn't here to be served. She was here to watch them serve and see who failed. "You need to leave before this becomes a problem," Linda snapped, her voice louder now. The quiet professionalism was cracking. Celeste didn't move. She tapped once on her screen. 02:59. A soft alert blinked. Protocol Alpha was now actively scanning staff behavior. Every word spoken within 10 feet of her was being recorded and tagged. Linda leaned in, arms crossed. "I'm serious. If you don't have credentials, you're trespassing." Across the room, A man in a sleek gray suit snorted. "She's probably here to cash someone else's check." A few chuckles followed. Not loud, but enough. Celeste didn't flinch. At the teller window, Elena stood frozen, eyes locked on the screen in Celeste's hand. She recognized the blinking icon. It wasn't just audit mode. It was real-time ethics surveillance. And only one type of person could trigger that: an owner, or someone with controlling interest. Linda moved to pick up the desk phone. "I'll call security." Before she could dial, Celeste spoke, soft but with weight. "Linda." The manager froze mid-motion. "You're assuming my worth," Celeste said, "based on what you see. But what you don't see is costing you more than you know." Linda scoffed. "I don't have time for riddles." Celeste locked eyes with her. "I'm not giving you a riddle. I'm giving you a mirror." Silence. A soft chime echoed through Celeste's phone. 0331. Violation flagged. Discriminatory language. Elena stepped forward, almost instinctively now. "Ms. Rayburn," she said carefully, "I think you need to stop talking." Linda turned, eyes sharp. "Excuse me?" But Elena wasn't looking at her anymore. She was looking at Celeste. Really looking. And this time she didn't see a woman in flats and a cardigan. She saw the quiet in the storm. She saw who was actually running the room. The room held its breath. For a long moment, no one moved. Not the man in the gray suit who smirked earlier. Not the woman with the tight clutch. Not even Linda, who stood frozen behind her desk like a statue carved out of authority and assumption. But then, Elena exhaled. She stepped fully into the lounge, her shoes clicking softly against polished marble. Her voice, when it came, was steady, even if her hands weren't. "I think there's been a mistake," she said. "Ms. Monroe has access to systems I've only seen in ethics training. That's not standard. That's oversight level." Linda whipped around. "Elena, I didn't ask for your opinion." Elena didn't back down. "I'm not giving you an opinion. I'm stating a fact." Celeste remained silent, watching, not just Elena, but the entire room. Her presence didn't fill the space with sound. It filled it with gravity. Linda's voice cracked. "She's trying to intimidate staff." "I'm not intimidated," Elena said, louder now. "I'm embarrassed." The room stirred. One of the men by the coffee machine set down his cup. A woman near the glass doors pulled out her phone, but didn't hit record. Not yet. Linda grabbed the desk phone again. "That's enough. I'm calling corporate." "No," Elena interrupted. "You don't get to control the story this time." Linda's face flushed. "You're making a scene." Elena looked at Celeste, then turned to Linda. "No, you already did. I'm just done pretending it's normal." Celeste's voice finally broke through, soft but steel-edged. "Let her speak, Linda. You've spoken enough." For the first time, Linda took a step back. And in that pause, something shifted. The air wasn't just heavy. It was changing. People weren't just watching anymore. They were listening. And for the first time in that room, Celeste Monroe wasn't the only one holding the truth. Linda's hands hovered over the desk phone, veins tight under her skin. She stared at Elena like betrayal had just taken physical form. "You're risking your job," she hissed. "For her?" Elena didn't flinch. "I'm risking my silence. That's not the same thing." Celeste didn't move. She hadn't all morning, but the air around her shifted, like something unseen had snapped into place. The timer on her screen hit 4:22. Blue Leaf's data stream was now logging full behavioral context, voice tone, proximity, coded language. Celeste tapped the screen once more, not to escalate, but to flag the moment. Linda leaned forward. "If this is some kind of protest, you'll regret it." "No," Celeste replied calmly. "If this is protest, it means something already failed." Elena turned to Celeste. Is this being sent to headquarters?" Celeste gave her the faintest nod. And for the first time, Elena understood. This wasn't just about today. This wasn't even about Linda. It was about every time someone looked like Celeste and got dismissed anyway. Linda's voice cracked again. "You don't have authority here." Celeste stood, slowly, gracefully. Her voice didn't rise, but the room quieted the second she opened her mouth. "I don't need to raise my voice to hold authority," she said. "I built the system that gave you this job." A hush fell across the lounge. Someone near the door whispered, "Wait, what?" Linda's eyes widened. "That's not possible." Celeste held up her phone, showing a seal now glowing in gold. Blue Leaf Founder Access. Active Compliance Oversight. The room stilled. Even the man who smirked earlier stood up a little straighter. "You're not being watched," Celeste said. "You're being evaluated." And just like that, Linda's grip on the room vanished, replaced by the silence of everyone realizing who they'd just tried to humiliate. At 04:58, the app vibrated once in Celeste's palm. A soft chime blinked across her screen. Blue Leaf Protocol Alpha, now live. The moment had come. Celeste didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked up and said, "I'd like to speak with the regional director." Linda scoffed, arms crossed. "That's not how this works. You can't just—" The glass door behind them opened before she could finish. A man in a slate gray suit stepped in, earpiece flashing. Thomas Granger, Regional Ethics Liaison. He didn't smile, didn't blink, just scanned the room like someone had flipped on a blacklight in a dirty kitchen. "Dr. Monroe," he said calmly, nodding toward Celeste. Linda turned. "Wait, you know her?" Granger ignored her. "Protocol Alpha is in effect," he announced to the room. "We are now in live compliance review. All branch operations are temporarily suspended." Elena blinked. "Wait, all?" Granger nodded. "Transactions, approvals, interactions, all of it." Linda's face lost its color. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here and shut down my branch." "It's not your branch," Celeste said quietly. "It's part of a network my fund invested in, a network I built safeguards for. You failed them." A low hum filled the room, phones buzzing, alerts chiming. 7 briar and thorn branches lit up red on a regional dashboard behind Granger's tablet. "Your location," he said to Linda, "has triggered the first ethics cascade of fiscal year 2025. Celeste finally stood, facing Linda fully. "You weren't just unkind," she said. "You were systemically careless." Linda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because in that moment, the woman she dismissed as nobody had just paused her entire career with one tap. "This is abuse of power," Linda barked, her voice rising. "I want her removed from the premises, now." Granger didn't flinch. "I'm not security, Ms. Rayburn. I'm here to observe and report. That's exactly what I'm doing." Linda snatched up the branch phone. "Then I'll call someone who is security." Celeste said nothing. She remained standing, eyes locked on Linda. Not angry, not smug. Just still. The air felt like it was folding in on itself. Staff shifted uncomfortably. Clients were no longer pretending not to listen. Linda dialed fast. "Yes, we have a disturbance in the private client lounge. Woman refusing to leave, possibly impersonating oversight." Possibly. That word alone made Elena's stomach turn. Celeste looked at her phone. Blue Leaf timestamp, 0607. Every word logged, every false claim flagged. And still, Celeste didn't record. She didn't threaten. She just stood, composed, in the eye of Linda's chaos. A man near the espresso bar muttered, "Why is she still being treated like this?" No one answered, but the question hung thick in the air. A moment later, 2 uniformed guards entered, young, nervous. One adjusted his belt like he didn't know whether to speak or salute. "We got a call," one said. "Manager reported an issue?" Elena stepped forward, voice tight but clear. "There is no issue. There is a woman being targeted for how she looks." Linda turned, flustered. "You're way out of line." "No," Elena said, louder. "You are." The younger guard looked at Celeste. "Ma'am, are you... Who she says you are? Celeste smiled politely. No, she said, I'm much more than that. And for the first time since she walked in, someone laughed. Soft, not mocking, but in awe. The guards didn't move. They didn't have to, because now the room wasn't on Linda's side anymore. By the time the second guard asked for clarification, the lounge had already shifted. No one was sipping coffee. No one was checking emails. Every eye was trained on the woman they once dismissed, and the manager who now looked more like a liability than a leader. I'll ask one more time, Linda snapped, voice brittle. Who do you think you are? Celeste didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to Elena and handed her the phone. Would you mind projecting this? She asked gently. Elena nodded, walked over to the mounted monitor behind the reception desk, and connected Celeste's device. The screen flickered, then lit up with a secure interface bearing an iridescent seal. Tranquil Equity Fund Founder Access. Blue Leaf Protocol. Ethics Tier Override. Active murmurs broke out across the room. Then Celeste stepped forward. No podium. No title card. Just presence. My name is Dr. Celeste Monroe, she began. I'm the founder of Tranquil Equity, the fund that owns 49% of Briar and Thorn's capital infrastructure. Linda's lips parted, then closed again. Not a word. I'm also the designer of the Blue Leaf Compliance Grid, Celeste continued, her voice calm but unwavering. The same system that just flagged this location, and 6 others, for repeated ethical breaches, including racially biased service patterns and abuse of client protocol. The screen shifted behind her, revealing a regional heat map. 7 branches pulsed in red. A figure appeared. $1.4 billion ESG funding. Frozen pending review gasps followed. Celeste paused, letting the numbers sink in. I came here today without a driver, no blazer, no gold watch, because I wanted to see not how you treat power, but how you treat people you think don't have any. Linda's knees bent slightly, as if her body finally caught up with what her mouth couldn't say. Granger, still standing by the entrance, cleared his throat. Corporate just confirmed, he said. You have full operational authority for immediate personnel action. Celeste nodded once, then turned to Linda. You wanted proof of who I am? She said, voice level. This is it. She gestured toward the monitor, toward the system, toward the silent room that now held more shame than judgment. You profiled the wrong person, Linda. She stepped back, looked at Elena. Thank you for choosing integrity. Elena blinked, then swallowed. No one's ever said that to me in here. Celeste gave her a quiet smile. Then we start today. And for the first time that morning, the room didn't just listen, it stood behind her. The silence in the lounge was no longer uncomfortable. It was surgical, precise, the kind of silence that follows a verdict. Celeste stepped back as the screen behind her shifted again. A secondary window opened, showing live alerts being pushed across the Blue Leaf compliance grid. Branch IDs, violation codes, frozen assets. In real time, $1.4 billion in ESG-backed funding vanished from operational flow. Across the room, a regional operations manager watching the feed whispered, She didn't just shut down this branch. She triggered a compliance lockdown. Linda finally spoke, but her voice had shrunk. You planned this. You set us up. Celeste turned slowly. No, she said. I gave you a chance. You failed it. The younger security guard took a step back. The older one stood frozen. Granger received a ping on his tablet and looked up. 2 more branches just triggered flags. 1 in Tampa, 1 in Charleston. Same pattern. Denied service to women of color in high-value transactions. Both linked to Linda's internal service protocols. Linda shook her head. I don't manage those locations. No, Celeste replied. But your policies do. Gasps rippled across the floor. Clients who had been silent now exchanged wide-eyed glances. One woman, white, late 60s, stepped forward quietly and said, I've banked here 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. Celeste met her eyes. It's always been here. You just weren't the one being watched. Elena stood straighter beside her. A third monitor lit up behind them. Breyer and Thorne Internal Risk Dashboard. Red, red, red. Granger turned to Celeste. "What's your move?" She paused, then said, "No new client activity, no high-risk clearance, no approval from regional until every frontline manager sits for verbal ethics audit." Linda let out a bitter breath. "You think you're saving this bank?" "No," Celeste said. "I'm exposing it." One of the guards took off his name tag and quietly walked to the back. Elena glanced at him, then to Celeste. "They're not all bad." "I know," Celeste replied. "But silence becomes policy when good people do nothing." The older woman who'd spoken earlier looked at Elena. "And if someone like her didn't come in today, would anything have changed?" Elena blinked, then shook her head. "Probably not." Celeste looked at the screen again, at the frozen funds, the cascading alerts, the network she'd spent years building now holding itself accountable. And for the first time that morning, she looked satisfied. Not angry, not triumphant, just done. The words hung in the air like the echo of a gavel. "I'm not saving this bank. I'm exposing it." And the room knew. This wasn't symbolic. This was real, immediate, structural. Granger stepped forward, checking his tablet. "Dr. Monroe, corporate ethics has granted you full discretionary authority. All personnel decisions are at your command." Celeste didn't nod. She didn't react like someone who'd won. She looked tired, but steady. This wasn't victory. It was duty. "Let's begin," she said simply. She turned to Linda, who was now pale and trying, unsuccessfully, to look composed. "Linda Rayburn, you are relieved of all duties, effective immediately," Celeste said. "Not for one incident, but for a pattern. You didn't just misread a client. You modeled that behavior into policy." Linda opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Celeste continued. "You built a culture of silent discrimination, and today, that silence ends." A soft chime echoed as Linda's credentials were deactivated on the screen behind them. Gasps, then whispers. Celeste turned to the two guards. "You'll remain, but only under observation. You'll both be reassigned pending compliance training." One nodded. The other looked away, shame blooming in his throat. Next came the branch assistant manager, quiet all morning but complicit. "You stayed silent through it all," Celeste said to him. "Silence isn't neutral, it's agreement. And today, that costs you your position." His tablet access vanished as well. Then she looked at Elena. "You stepped forward when it mattered. You chose truth over comfort." Elena swallowed. "I was scared." Celeste offered a faint smile. "That's what makes it meaningful." Granger turned the monitor to face the room. A message appeared. All branch operations paused. Compliance reset. Initiated, clients stared in disbelief. The woman in her 60s, still holding her purse, whispered, "She just restructured a branch in real time." Celeste turned to the group of onlookers. "This isn't about punishing bad behavior. It's about ending tolerated injustice." She took a breath, then declared, "Effective immediately, all Breyer and Thorne branches under ESG funding must undergo verbal conduct audits and adopt real-time ethics tracking. Non-compliance will result in funding suspension." Not a single person moved. Not a single person doubted. Because in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't just about a bank. It was about every place where power had been allowed to hide behind civility. By noon, the story had already reached regional headquarters. A compliance alert flagged 7 branches. 3 had already been locked from internal transaction systems. One CEO called it an unintentional incident. Another called it an anomaly. But Celeste called it what it was: culture. Inside the Savannah Lounge, the monitors now displayed a new document, simple, stark, and impossible to ignore. The Fair Client Treatment Charter mandated adoption, All Briar and Thorn branches under ESG compliance. Celeste didn't need to explain it. She'd written it herself 6 years ago, filed it, fought for it, and watched it get shelved every quarter since. Until today. Granger stepped forward to the monitor. "Effective immediately," he said. "All branches must sign and display this charter in public client areas. Verbal bias, coded profiling, and passive obstruction will be measured and tracked. Real time." A hush moved across the room. Someone asked, "Is that even legal?" Celeste answered, "Ethics aren't about law. They're about leadership." She stepped toward the center of the lounge. No stage, no mic. Just presence. "I'm not here to save face," she said. "I'm here to save trust." A young man in a navy suit stood near the back. "I'm from Atlanta branch," he said. "We've seen this behavior too. We just didn't know who to tell." Celeste nodded. "Now you do." He looked down, almost ashamed. "We wanted change. We just didn't believe it was possible." "You don't have to believe in it," Celeste replied. "You just have to stand in it." That line hit the room like a stone in water. Small ripples, deep reach. Granger's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, then looked up. "Briar and Thorn Corporate has just requested that you lead a task force," he said. "Not just on this branch, but system-wide reform. Starting now." Elena's eyes widened. Celeste didn't blink. "I'll do it, under one condition." Granger raised a brow. "Which is?" "That we don't teach the staff how to serve better. We teach them how to see better." He stared at her for a second, then nodded. "You just changed our entire onboarding model." Celeste turned back to the room. "I don't want this charter to sit in a break room," she said. "I want it spoken, lived, measured." She looked at Elena. "You'll be the first to implement it, right here." Elena nearly choked. "Me?" "You earned it." A ripple of applause started, tentative at first, then louder, fuller, not performative, not polite, real. And then the older white woman from earlier, who had sat quietly through it all, spoke softly. "We all saw what happened today, and we all let it happen." Celeste didn't nod. She didn't shame her. She just held her gaze and said, "Then let's all make sure it never happens again." The woman stepped forward. "Where do we start?" Celeste took a breath, looked around. "Right here," she said. In the same place, it almost stayed hidden. Celeste didn't linger. There were no press cameras, no dramatic speeches, just the quiet clack of her heels against the marble as she walked toward the exit. Elena rushed after her. "Wait, are you just leaving?" Celeste turned, warm but firm. "You don't need me here anymore. You need space to lead." "But I'm not ready." Celeste gave a small smile. "Neither was I when I started." Elena blinked. "How did you know what to do?" Celeste looked back toward the branch one last time. "I didn't," she said. "But I knew what not to accept." Elena lowered her voice. "What if they push back?" "They will. Then what? Stand anyway." Behind them, staff had already begun removing the outdated service pledge from the wall. In its place, a new plaque was being mounted. Simple, clear, powerful. "We don't serve clients, we serve justice. The Fair Client Treatment Charter, 2025. Granger stepped into view and handed Elena a sealed envelope. "Corporate's already signed off. You're officially promoted to acting branch director." Elena's eyes widened. I thought it'd take years." "It usually does," he said. "But change doesn't wait when someone like her walks through the door." Celeste gave him a respectful nod, then turned back to Elena. "You'll make mistakes, but the only one you can't afford is silence." Elena nodded, eyes glossy. "I won't be silent." Celeste touched her shoulder lightly. "Then you'll do fine." And with that, she walked out, past the guards, past the lounge, past the institution that once tried to make her invisible. Not one word more, not one backward glance, just presence and legacy. A week later, Briar and Thorn quietly launched a new system-wide reform. The Blue Leaf Ethics Standard. a mandatory real-time monitoring tool for all client-facing personnel across 312 branches. The press never got the full story. No names were leaked, no viral video. But within industry circles, something shifted. The kind of shift you feel, not hear. And on one quiet afternoon in Atlanta, a mid-level branch manager handed a woman in a head wrap a glass of water without being asked. No script, no side glance, just respect. Back in Savannah, Elena stood in the same lobby where Celeste had once stood still and watched a client get treated with warmth, patience, and presence. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just whispered to herself, she didn't need to stay. She just needed to show us where the line is. And across the country, slowly but surely, that line began to hold. Sometimes the loudest justice is the kind that doesn't raise its voice. Have you ever seen someone stay calm in the face of humiliation and still change everything without saying much? Let us know in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and who in your life reminds you of Celeste Monroe.